Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1593. The topic is mindset and the title is Use Life's Inconsistency to Your Advantage. I hear this often from clients, and every time I hear it I always laugh. And part of what always makes me laugh as well is I train adults, so I do train some youth, but overwhelmingly, the most people I train, they're like 20s, 30s, 40s, even into like 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I'll even hear what I'm about to say to you. I hear this from people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that's what makes me laugh, what I often hear is they'll be referencing, when they're going to do the next thing. Like, when will they get back on their diet? When will they start a diet? When will they get back into consistent training? When will they start training? When they're going to do this next thing, or when they're going to regain control over the thing they should have been doing already. This is what they say: when things get back to normal. That makes me laugh. That's a ridiculous phrase. I'm only 39 years old, and I've known this before, but there is no normal. That's my response to clients. So when they say, when things get back to normal, I'll blah, 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 blah. And then I always say, there is no normal, do it now. So, sound like a big fat jerk. But there's no normal in life. Life is always changing. It's always like evolving. Things are just like you're in between periods. So if you think something's like, oh, it's pretty normal right now, for now. And I'm happy for you. Like, if you're experiencing something that feels like it's normal, good Lord, hallelujah. Definitely a good time in your life. But there's times between chaos that can feel like the norm, but often moments between chaos aren't exactly what they were before the last chaos. So if I have a time period, I experience a chaos, I go back to what feels like normal, that new normal often can be a little bit different than what the old normal was. So the new normal is actually a little different. Therefore, there is differences, there is inconsistency, there's always change. So that is something that I think if we recognize that life is inconsistent, if we recognize that, if we accept that, we can use that to our advantage. So even when life gets absolutely crazy, we can think to ourselves, can I use this moment? What can I get from this moment? And I know that that's hard. Like, I've been through a little bit of craziness in my life, but I know that there are people who've been through more significant craziness, for sure. We all have our own kind of degrees of craziness, and to try to compare one person's craziness to another person's craziness is a useless kind of comparison. Because to everybody that's experienced the worst day of their life, it's the worst day of your life, regardless of what somebody else's worst day of their life is, right? Now, we can kind of look at other people's lives to put our life in perspective and realize, oh, hey, I'm kind of worked up and bummed about this thing, but I guess it could be worse. So you can use it for like some reference points and stuff, but you shouldn't not allow yourself to grieve or to feel maximally stressed just because somebody else has been through something a little bit more. This is still the most you've been through. So it's still going to be your worst day, right? So when we face our struggles and challenges, I do understand that if you're in the struggle, if you're in the challenge, then yes, the message of today's podcast is going to feel like a slap in the face, or you're going to just argue with me the whole time. But before you get to your next challenge, before you get to your next worst day of your life, let's be a little mentally prepared. So what I mean by this is using life's inconsistencies to our advantage is to kind of have an idea of how to approach the moments of our life. How do we approach them mentally so we can always be improving in each moment and or not be set back as far from each moment? When things are going well, what can we do? You can sit back and just enjoy it. Not a bad thing. Certainly not a bad thing if you're coming out of times of things not going well. You can sit back and enjoy it for a little while. Let yourself relax. Let yourself recover emotionally, mentally, maybe financially, relationally. there might be some time where when things are going well, you just let them go well. You enjoy that. You let that kind of, sweep over you, let that fall over you, let that comfort you. But we also have to be mindful that when things are going well, when we feel like we're coming out of the place of recovery, and we're like, oof, I just kind of feel good here now. Well, that's a time when you can use it to your advantage. When things are going well and you feel like you've recovered, when you feel like you start to have some margin, some capacity for something new, you're going to work to refine what you're doing. So if you're doing something and it's going well, refine what you're doing so it can continue to go well. When we work hard, all of a sudden we make more money, and then if we go spend all that money, we have to go back to working hard, right? It kind of makes sense. So if we work hard, we make more money, we save some, spend some. Then we're actually better off in the future because we had that savings, right? So we know that's kind of true with money. That's also true with just our mental capacity, our daily habits, our life. Is when things are going well, recognize that, okay, what I'm doing now, can I improve upon this? Can I refine this? Can I make it even better? So that way things continue to go well. That's a really good mindset. Have an awareness, okay, things are going really well. I have a little bit of margin. How can I make this even better? Wouldn't that be nice, right? Or if we have that margin, we can try to take on something new. Maybe you just got out of a crazy period of life and you're like, I'd like to get into some training. I'd like to, try to reach a physical goal. Maybe it's weight loss. Maybe it's building muscle tissue. Maybe you want to compete. Maybe you've always had a dream of competing in, on stage or in a powerlifting meet or in a strength event or something. And you have a little bit of capacity and you're like, hey, I'd like to go for that right now. And that's an awesome moment. I know some people that when they have a little bit of capacity, they go back to get another degree, back to grad school or a doctorate or something. Something that maybe can benefit their profession, but maybe they just want it. You're allowed to just want things in life. That's okay. But when things are going well, it's a good idea. It's a good time to work to refine what you're doing so you can continue to improve upon it and continue to keep it going well. And then if you have the newfound margin, if you have some space, to work on something that will continue to improve your life. What we do when things go well is easy. It's a little bit easier. People do fall in the trap of just kind of being lazy and just enjoying it, but not really taking advantage of it. And then things go back to being bad, and then they're like, oh man, I wish I would have done X, Y, Z when things were good, So just remember to do X, Y, Z when things are going well. And then when things aren't going well, what can we do? How can we take advantage of the negative, the bad moments of life? Well, to just survive them is definitely a goal. How can we survive them well? Is to work to maintain your minimums and find the lesson. Those are two things I remind myself when things are kind of high stress for me is, what's my minimums? Whatever progress I've made in nutrition, for fat loss or body composition or muscle tissue or strength, what's the least I can do right now to at least maintain my nutrition? Same for training. What's the least I can do right now to at least maintain my physical progressions? What's the least I can do right now to maintain my finances, to maintain my relationships, to maintain my work quality? So knowing your minimums ahead of time and then working to maintain your minimums is extremely helpful because when you come out of the bad times, you didn't go backwards. Maybe you just stood still. Maybe you stood your ground during the negatives. And that's a hell of an accomplishment, to stand your ground. To come out of the negatives at least where you were when you went in them. That's amazing. If you can do that, that's pretty damn awesome, right? So when you get into tough times, say, what are my minimums? If I'm feeling overwhelmed with nutrition, trying to maintain what I was doing before the tough times, you don't have to. Just know what your minimum is to maintain, and then give yourself a little bit extra space by not trying to do everything. That gives you extra margin, extra emotional, mental margin to help manage that negative time. Same thing with training. Know your minimums. Rather than feeling stressed out and beating yourself up over not being able to maintain the usual thing, just know what your minimums are, do that, and again, give yourself a little more space for a mental, emotional capacity. Same thing with finances. What's the minimum I have to do? With my relationships, what's the minimum I have to do? If you do that in 3, 4, 5, 6 areas of your life, all of a sudden you've opened up this large, significant amount of margin, emotional, mental margin, that you can now better manage the negative times. You don't feel so depressed. It doesn't cause you to just crash and burn in every possible way, to just all out quit. So working to maintain your minimums actually gives you more capacity to manage the chaos, to manage the negatives. And then, find the lesson. In this moment, what's the lesson of this moment? What can I learn from this? How can I strengthen myself through this? What changes can I make to avoid this in the future? Is there maybe a hidden benefit in this moment? Is there something I've been putting off that now all of a sudden I can actually do? I have capacity for it. When we face negative times, it absolutely will feel overwhelming. To get back to just whelming, to not be overwhelmed and just whelmed, know your minimums and perform those in as many areas of life as you can. So that way you get little bits of margin from each area. That'll allow you to better emotionally and mentally manage the negatives. And then in the negatives, find the lesson. If you're searching out how this moment can be useful to you, it's a proactive mindset. And that is a mindset that will help you push through and progress through the negatives. Rather than sitting there and thinking that everything is being done to you, and you get buried in it. You can be proactive. You know, a rolling stone gathers no moss. If you keep moving, life can't keep dumping onto you. It will, but then you're going to shed that one off and get to the next moment. It's going to dump on you again. You're going to shed that off, get to the next moment. But you're not going to get buried. That's the key. When things aren't going well, work to maintain your minimums. Get yourself a little bit of emotional and mental margin. And then find the lesson. What can you learn from this? What changes can you make to avoid this in the future? Is there a hidden benefit in this moment? Things work out for those who continue to work. It's a good concept, a good quote to remember. Things work out for those who continue to work. When things aren't going your way, how will you eventually get to the good side? How will it eventually work out okay? How does it work out well? How do you just get out, right? You work. Things work out for those who continue to work. When things aren't going your way, work. Work to maintain your minimums and work to find the lesson. Keep moving. Keep moving. Keep moving. I wish you the best of luck in life. It will have its ups and downs. When you get the ups, enjoy the hell out of it. When you get the downs, just keep moving. Keep working to maintain your minimums. Keep working to find the lesson. Just keep pushing through. Well, if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let me know. My email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like today's podcast or podcast in general, please share it. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people the podcast can help. When you share the podcast, let people know that we answer questions for free. They can email us, and I'll make a podcast for them totally free of charge. Thank you to those who donate to support the podcast. We can actually do that. So if you want to donate, you can do so on our website at www.brittlirongym.com. Helps go towards the overall hosting costs that we have every year. I give an hour to this podcast every single day, so it just helps kind of cover the overall cost. And I really appreciate it. It really does make a difference. Even just $5 a month, it helps significantly. Thank you very much to those who do that. If you like the information we share on our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. On Instagram, I post every single day, and on YouTube, I post a lot. So find us and follow us under the name Brittle Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.